Part 98. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 985. Today in Chengdu, the weather was strange and abnormal. First, there were dark clouds rolling in the sky, and then hail appeared inexplicably, followed by snowflakes, and then the clouds quickly cleared and the weather returned to normal, except for the constant roaring sound. The residents living in Wuhao district were scared to death. After all, Sichuan is an area prone to earthquakes. Although ordinary earthquakes have little impact on Chengdu, they are enough to scare people. Fortunately, the roar began to slowly shift, and then stopped being heard. Boom! On the mountain Col on the side of the expressway in the western suburbs of Chengdu, Lyman was slammed into the ground by Subai, but an ice sword was shot from Lyman and cut off Subai's head directly. Next, there was a very strange scene. The headless Subai was still floating in the air, his body covered with bruises and bones, while Lyman staggered out. The two of them moved the battlefield in a tacit understanding as they fought, because no one could afford to be there. The price of a divine punishment in a densely populated metropolis. But what Lyman doesn't know is that Chengdu is, after all, a city mainly built of reinforced concrete, with not much vegetation coverage. Once you leave the city and enter the nearby mountains, it will be difficult for Subai. Speaking of which, it is actually more convenient for him to replenish his vitality. Of course, with Subai in this state, if Lyman continues to insist on fighting in Chengdu, no one knows whether Subai will directly take the life of a living person to replenish it. The thing is, you have to know that when Subai first fell ill, he almost brought 8,000 resentful souls into Shanghai, frightening the lamas who caused the trouble. With all his strength focused on speed and attack power, Subai's body actually became very brittle, but the bloodlines began to become active and rewoven the outline of Subai's head, and then the skin and flesh regenerated and covered it. Subai, who had just lost his head, quickly returned to normal, except that a piece of vegetation on a nearby mountain turned yellow. Lyman was breathing heavily, and his ribs were clearly visible on his chest. There were many wounds in other places, and there were also several corpse poisons left by the other party, ready to bite him back at any time. At the beginning, in this duel, Lyman was able to suppress Subai, but he could not kill Subai at all. Then, as the frost dragon was contaminated by Subai and escaped far away, the ice judgment gun was destroyed by Subai. After counter-attacking with a strange bloodline collapse, the situation began to take a turn for the worse. This can be regarded as a kind of ebb and flow. If at the beginning, Lyman only had the upper hand but could not score, now he has begun to be beaten by Subai, and unknowingly it has become a situation that he, Lyman, can only struggle to support. This guy. Is it really, immortal? Lyman's throat felt a little bitter. At this moment, he understood what Subai said before, that no one among the bosses could kill him. This was not an arrogant lie, because he had just proved it with actual actions. However, in fact, Subai's side is not that easy. He consumes and recovers again and again. It seems that Subai has absorbed a lot of power, but in fact, he is still in a state of semi-overdraft, even if he can reach out to the surroundings. To gain vitality, even if most of the side effects of Ancient Zombie's second turn were filled by Su Fugui's backup, this combat method of purely treating himself as a rapid energy converter was indeed very stressful for him. Especially when you only focus on attack and ignore defense. If you kill me, you will be punished by the broadcast. Even if you are justified, I did not hurt your son after all. Lyman panted and looked at Subai in the air and said, he actually wanted to say one more thing about it, but Subai didn't give him a chance to say the next sentence, and the whole person disappeared again, with the same order as before. The person rushed towards him again at a shocking speed. Lyman let out a roar in his throat, but this roar contained a little bit of strength. Even though he was a tiger, he had been squeezed dry by defeats again and again, regardless of his own strength or fighting. I fell into a deep state of exhaustion mentally. Boom. Just like the previous times, facing Subai's purely unreasonable offensive speed, Layman failed to predict and block it in advance. Before, he could make some interceptions in other ways, and then when he was hit, by the way, Subai also came, but this time he was completely at a disadvantage and couldn't even fight back. This hill was smashed through by Subai and Lyman, and the ground began to shake at this moment. Finally, when the sand and stone debris fell down, the scene became much clearer. Subai, who was missing an arm, a leg, and even half of his head, still steadily stabbed Lyman's chest with his only remaining hand, using himself as a nail to nail Lyman. Got here. And Lyman's chest was almost completely torn, and he could no longer be called a complete person. Lyman wanted to open his mouth to say something, but a wisp of blood spilled from the corner of his mouth. A look of horror flashed in Lyman's pupils, because the blood flowing out now was not his. Roar. Subai, who was missing half of his head, opened his mouth, raised his head and screamed in the air, and then the blood he injected into Lyman's body began to boil. Lyman's extremely broken body almost fell apart at this time. Even when Lyman wrapped his soul in ice and tried to escape, a layer of blood mist directly enveloped him and forced him back. Subai finished screaming, he lowered his head, and his only remaining eye looked at Lyman under him with ridicule and teasing. Subai fought very comfortably in this duel. It could even be said that it was the most comfortable battle he had ever fought against an opponent with a higher level than himself since he became a listener. It was no longer just a matter of exchanging injuries for injuries, but relying on his strong body and abnormal recovery ability to suppress Lyman all the way. Lyman. No chance at all. Subai once said before that no one under the boss can kill him. Now, he has completed this bold statement. At the same time, he has also personally taken it one step further. Under the boss level audience, even if it is a high-level listener whose realm is one level higher than his own, he is absolutely sure to defeat him. Of course, there may be exceptions for extremely outstanding beings like Chen Ryu or Hills, but Subai is now certain that even if Chen Ryu appears in person to fight with him, it will be difficult for her to kill him, and he is confident that he can fight with her. War. These are all things Subai realized clearly in this duel with Lyman. Although his level has not improved, in terms of improvement in combat effectiveness and fighting methods, the impact of this battle on Subai is really too great. Lyman's soul was forced back by Subai, but his body is now being fused by Subai, and now his soul has nowhere to go. Let me go, or else, your son, will definitely die. Just die. Subai, who had half his face left, replied with a cruel smile, anyway, you die in front of him. Do you want to provoke a war between the East and the West? Lyman threatened. You are really interesting. Subai laughed. In fact, from the beginning of the battle to now, Subai's mood has been in a state of abnormal excitement, fearless and unscrupulous. Even if the broadcast was broadcast at this time, if Subai suddenly appeared and asked Subai not to kill Lyman, he might just go on the radio. In the past, Subai had seen his clones and blood corpses go to the broadcast. Even if it was a moth flying into the flame, at least it was meaningful to the moth himself. You came to threaten me with my son to sacrifice, now you actually blame me for provoking a war between the Eastern and Western audiences. Subai lowered his head, stuck out his tongue, and licked the side of Lyman's face hard. After taking a sip, he put his mouth to Lyman's ear and whispered, "This is my body. Originally, I didn't want to take it back, but now, I want it back, because, you don't deserve him." Lyman's face had become distorted. Subai's blood in Lyman's body exploded completely, making the body completely immersed in a pool of blood. Then, the mutilated Subai fell directly downwards, and his whole body was submerged into the blood pool. Gudu, 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 gudu. The blood pool kept bubbling, like a boiling hot pot. Finally, the blood pool began to shrink, and a whole hand protruded from it, like a swimmer crawling out of the water again. Then, Sudbai's head, body, and finally, Sudbai's whole body crawled out of the blood pool. When Sudbai's feet came out, all the blood in the blood pool just happened to be submerged into Sudbai's body. Sudbai is still the same Sudbai, and his face has not changed, which means that after reshaping his body this time, he still chose his previous appearance instead of becoming Lehman's appearance before. For Sudbai, there was no confusion or difficulty in choosing. Even if this body belonged to Erbai at first, he was Sudbai and Sudbai was him. There was no need to shake this point, and there was no need to shake it. Sudbai opened his palms, and a crystal-like soul appeared in Sudbai's palms. This was Lehman's soul. This long duel finally ended with Lehman's complete defeat. "I will find you a new body after the battle." Sudbai was also tired, so he said these words a little feebly, but in the ears of Lehman, who was on the verge of despair, it seemed that Sudbai had already understood and made the right choice. "I will inform my companions that they will not do anything to your son." Sudbai twitched the corner of his mouth and looked at Lehman as if he were a fool. "Without a body, how can you put on that thing and send a signal?" Lehman. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 986. Janek's decision was tantamount to completely abandoning the tone of this operation that Lehman and everyone had set before, because this operation was completely out of his previous control. Although the situation at the orphanage seemed to be it has been brought back to the balance, but there is still a new force like myself that has not joined. In addition, Zack, Macron, and Chicos have actually been holding back. As long as they want to, they can directly exert force. The situation here is actually still under their control. But Lehman actually cut off contact, and the Chinese named Sudbai hurried back as expected, not to mention making him a victim. Now he even asked the other party to take the initiative to take out the item. The goal of allowing everyone to return home was not achieved. After all, this is the territory of the East. If you stay for a long time, you will inevitably have long nights and many dreams. Janek has no choice but to choose this method, but it is also the most sensible method at this time. The next moment, Janek's figure appeared next to Zack, and a magic wand appeared in his palm. Vast and powerful light magic rippled away at this moment. Forbidden, the eye of light, sealed forever. A small sun rose from behind Janek, and then directly hit the stone man in the sky who was about to set again. Chen Guang, who was controlling the stone man from behind, felt that the stone man suddenly felt hot. The connection he had just established with the stone man was completely blocked at this moment. Zack understood it and no longer held back his hands or scruples. He rose into the air and kicked the stone man. This time, it seemed that due to the ban on light magic, the stone man no longer showed the things that had made Zack scruple before. The strange energy fluctuations were kicked out by Zack and hit directly halfway up a lonely mountain in the distance. After losing the protection of the stone man, the light in the sky was completely exposed to Zack. There is a saying that if you are called out to mess around, you will always have to pay back. Previously, Chen Guang relied on the stone man to suppress and beat the high-level audience strongman Zack, and he was naturally hardy. Now, when he needs to face the high-level Zack with his basic strength, it is really not enough. Zack's attack is very simple, one punch followed by a kick. Although his image looks like a circus clown, he is actually more into the physical arts school. As for why he dresses like this, it is just because before he became an audience, Zack was a clown in a well-known circus. That's all. Chen Guang tried his best to catch Zack's punch, but he showed his embarrassment on that kick. He was kicked down directly. Zack took advantage of the victory and pursued it, and a rusty longsword appeared in his palm. The aura around him was directly raised to the peak, and the murderous intention was fully revealed. Obviously, it was just a matter of time for him to solve Chen Guang, But Chen Guang did not choose to continue to carry it out at this time. Although he knew that he could resist for a while if he tried his best, he agreed to the fat man's move. But did not agree to the fat man to fight for him here. At that moment, under Zhok's stunned eyes, Chen Guang's figure sank directly into the ground and fled directly into the distance. When a junior powerhouse wants to escape, even a high-level powerhouse will find it difficult to successfully intercept and kill him. Zack has a feeling that the power he has accumulated for a long time has finally been hit in the cotton, because before, both the two black cats, the llama and the fat man, showed an attitude of fighting to the death, so they gave Zack a wrong impression. It is absolutely certain that the Eastern audience will be very angry when faced with the provocation of the Western audience. He had the guts to choose to fight to the death, so Zack was so surprised by Chen Guang's direct escape. Fine. If the Eastern audience was really so united, it would be difficult. Janek appeared directly next to Macron when Zack attacked Chen Guang. At this time, Fatty was planning to draw thunder again. For Fatty, the thunder drawing technique is the most offensive one he has mastered now. One of the means. But Janek just waved his magic wand into the air, and the light shone down on the world. The calamity cloud that the fat man finally summoned disappeared into thin air at this moment. The fat man's body trembled, and a stream of blood spilled from the corner of his mouth. He stepped back for more than 10 steps and shouted to Lord Buddha. This guy must be poisonous. The other party had just appeared last and issued a new order, which was enough to show this person's leadership status among this group of high-level Western powerhouses. If you are not strong, who will obey your leadership? Macron collided with Buddha again. Even though Buddha tried his best, he was still completely at a disadvantage in this purely physical collision. His realm was lower than Macron. In addition, he had grown up before. The bones and teeth in his body have brought him great trauma. Now, he is naturally unable to continue the stalemate with Macron. For now, he can only choose to avoid direct collision with Macron as much as possible to delay his fall. The outcome of defeat. To be honest, Foye was the only one here at the beginning. Of course, Suner was also there, but in a battle of this level, it basically had no effect, so Foye was under greater pressure at the beginning. In the fight against the car, Buddha would not have become so embarrassed. Fatty slashed his Daomu sword, biting the tip of his tongue and spitting out a mouthful of blood on the Daomu sword, and then the Daomu sword flew. For a moment, the area centered on Fatty turned into a ghost land, as if there were evil spirits from the hell of hell. The ghost is struggling to get out of here. This is a type of spiritualism, similar to the great immortal upper body of northeastern shamans. But there was nothing more than a contemptuous smile on the corner of Janek's mouth. He flicked the wand lightly, and the ghost realm behind the fat man seemed to be wrapped with layers of chains, directly locking the evil spirits inside. The ghost can't come out, and he still has a shitty body. Suppression, this is complete suppression by the opponent. Fatty's heart was filled with 10,000 cunts. Damn it, there really is no harm without comparison. If he had a high-level combat force on his side, it would be easier to fight. If Chen Runa was here, she would be in front. I think the brothers who play support can give it a try, but now they can only be bullied one-on-one, which is really frustrating. Janek waved his magic wand again, and a pure white light curtain appeared in front of him. He took a step forward. God said, "Let there be light." In an instant, the fat man only felt a strong beam of light shining on him. The fat man let out a scream, turned his palm, and a black talisman was thrown out and turned into a barrier to barely block it, but even for a moment, the fat man's body was already dripping with blood and miserable. Then hand over that thing and we will leave directly. Otherwise, it will be the same as killing you and searching for your soul, Janek shouted. Hand it to you, Malar Gobe. The fat man had no idea that that thing was a magical thing. At this time, Zack suddenly appeared behind Fatty and launched a sneak attack from behind. He directly broke through Fatty's barrier and stabbed him directly with the rusty iron sword in his hand. He had no intention of stopping and was going to take someone away. Life. In the distance, Jixiang relied on his weird body skills and the demon clan's innate magical power to fight evenly with Chico's. After all, Chico's was good at sorcery and formations, and these two of his strongest methods were restrained by Jixiang. But Chico's is not in a hurry, because his companions on the other side should have almost finished the battle. This group of yellow-skinned monkeys don't know the heights of the sky. Chico's was very comfortable and continued to drag Jixiang, but now even if Jixiang wanted to go back to support there, he couldn't get away. Zock's iron sword did not hit the fat man, and he managed to avoid it. However, the combination of Zack and Pjanik was undoubtedly a nightmare for the fat man. The next moment, Pjanik directly used the light system. Magic sealed the surrounding area, blocking Fatty's movement area, and Zack entered directly with an iron sword in hand. "Don't destroy the soul, first destroy the body," Pjanik reminded. Zock's iron sword stabbed directly across. Fatty blocked it with his mahogany sword, but then the surrounding light energy poured directly into his body, causing Fatty's body to freeze, which was equivalent to giving Zack a big gap. Puff. Zock's iron sword stabbed the fat man's left arm, and with a slight pick, he cut off the fat man's entire arm like a steak. "You," the fat man cursed, but he still chose to resist. A blood talisman appeared in his palm. He was planning to burn the boat. Even if he couldn't kill the opponent, he would at least injure the opponent severely before he died. Pjanik's face hardened, and he was greatly surprised by the fat man's perseverance. "My Buddha is compassionate." At this moment, a sound of Buddha's voice suddenly appeared, and the shadow of a giant Buddha began to fall, instantly breaking Pjanik's trap. Pjanik still picked up the wand and tried to lift it, but this time he failed. To put it lightly, the vast and fierce Buddha's power instantly broke through the barrier of his light magic and hit his body, causing Pjanik to fly backwards. At the same time, a string of Buddhist beads seemed to suddenly appear behind Zack. Zack quickly turned around and raised his sword to block, but failed to bounce the beads away. Instead, the hilt of his sword was hit him, knocking him back dozens of meters. For a moment, the fatal situation for Fatty was completely resolved in an instant. The fat man covered his bloody right shoulder with one hand, with a look of surprise on his face, and shouted, "I'm drafting Uncle, monk, you are cheating." Right next to Buddha, the figure of the monk appeared. Immediately, the golden body of Arhat came and penetrated directly into Buddha's body. Buddha, who was barely holding on, exerted force and pushed Macron directly away from him. The purple cassock worn by the monk floated over and brought the battle back to the forefront again. At the same time, he smiled slightly and said to the fat man who looked extremely miserable now, "Happy Mid-Autumn Festival. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 987. Happy Mid-Autumn Festival. When the fat man received this greeting from the monk, he was stunned for a moment. Then he realized that today was the Mid-Autumn Festival, and immediately felt that there was a big bucket of MMP in his throat that he wanted to spit out. Damn it! The fat man has been so miserable here just now. How can you, the monk, be like a god and come down to earth? Why don't you also give us a holiday greeting? Do you want to take out another mooncake from the cassock for me? Just as the fat man was thinking about these things, he didn't expect that the monk actually reached out and took out a box of mooncakes from his cassock and handed it out. "I don't know if the rice-flavored mooncakes I bought in Xi'an will suit your taste." Fatty. Buddha. Now the fat man really wants to hit the monk on the chest with his small fist and tell the monk that there are 4 enemies in front of him. But the monk didn't seem to care, and still had a cheerful expression on his face. Retreat. Pjanik's face condensed and he made a decision directly. The monk who suddenly appeared may not have the ability to directly challenge four, but coupled with the two monsters, the llama and the fat man, and the ones just now the listeners who have escaped but are definitely still watching nearby have the ability to entangle themselves and others. Here, after all, is the East. At present, this operation that was originally thought to be a sure win and even Long Wangshu has fallen into an embarrassing situation of fuel tactics. God knows how many Eastern listeners will come if the stalemate continues. If the two big guys from the East are alarmed again, even if they are far apart now, for existences at their level, pure spatial distance really has little restraint on them. Zack and Macron were still hesitant, but they also knew that when Pjanik was ready to retreat for the sake of safety, it would be useless for him and others to stay. Chicos, who was still fighting with Ji Xiang in the distance, received the message from his companions and was about to leave the battle group. Even after such a long time, the Chinese listener named Subai didn't come back. Even Lyman lost contact. In fact, everyone had a premonition that something really happened. It's just that Jixiang seemed to have noticed the other party's intention to leave in advance, and began to attack Chicos even more crazily. This made Chicos a little embarrassed. He felt that the cat demon in front of him seemed to be crazy and started to act like he was not afraid of his life. The purpose of playing with injuries is just to prevent yourself from completely getting out. Monk, they are ready to go for a walk. I really don't want to let them get away with it like this. The fat man gritted his teeth and said that this time he and others were acting in pure self-defense. These Western listeners, the fat man, did not know each other at all, and judging from the situation, Monk Subai and the others should not know them, so they were simply visited by strangers inexplicably. Bullying, now these people want to leave after showing off, it's really frustrating. The most irritating thing is that he and Foya are seriously injured now. Although they are not without fighting ability, their fighting ability is definitely greatly reduced. If we continue to fight now, we can only rely on the monks and 2-in-1s who came back from nowhere. It's auspicious. Well, if that guy Chen Guan can come back, the best situation with the 4 high-level strong men on the opposite side will be evenly matched, and even after they really fight each other to death, it's hard to say who will lose and who will win. I'm afraid someone has to die here too. The monk did not take the initiative again. He seemed very calm. Before, Buddha and Fatty had to fight to the death because they were at a disadvantage. But now that the balance has been restored, he has the ability to protect the orphanage. Naturally, he can wait and see. From the perspective of a friend or, more importantly, a godfather, the method chosen by the monk is actually correct, and there is nothing to criticize. After all, if you only care about your own happiness, the orphanage will be destroyed by a sneak attack in the melee. They couldn't explain it to Subai, so Fatty and Buddha also acquiesced in the monk's choice, even though they had just been seriously injured by those Westerners. But for Ji Xiang, if these guys actually dare to peek at the little guy and dare to do anything to try to hurt the little guy, then this matter is completely unfinished and will never end. Jixiang's temper has always been very grumpy, and Ruyi's temper can only become even more grumpy, so the two grumpy cats can only become even more grumpy when combined, so when Zack and the other 3 have already stopped and are about to retreat, Jixiang's side the Chicos still couldn't get away. Zack was going to help, at least help Chicos repel the cat first and then leave. Pjanik did not take action, but stared at the monk. Obviously, in his opinion, this monk was one of these Oriental people. The one who sees the greatest threat. Meow. Facing Zack, who was trying to join the battle group, Ji Xiang let out a sharp roar and continued fighting without any scruples. Even if his injuries were reduced, he had no intention of stopping. But the monk had no way to help Jixiang. Once he went there, it would be difficult for Buddha and Fatty on his side, so it can only be said that Jixiang was still there to actively stalemate when the two sides had consciously stopped fighting, But everyone, it is impossible to see any accidents happening to Jixiang there, so it means that Jixiang's extreme performance is likely to cause the war that has just subsided to ignite again. This is also helpless. The fat man couldn't stand it anymore, so he started to arrange the formation with one arm. Buddha activated the secret method to reinstill strength into his damaged body. At this time, the monk pinched the prayer beads in his hand, ready to launch an attack at any time. Jixiang was repulsed by the combined attacks of Zack and Chico's. Jixiang, who was already lame on one leg, continued to take the initiative to attack again with his broken body. This left absolutely no room for him. "Do it, monk." The fat man couldn't hold it in any longer, so he scattered the chess pieces in his hand, and a formation was arranged directly. He was actually not good at close combat, and was more suitable for this type of field control using formations. At this time, Buddha also had a wave of energy rising around his body. There was a layer of black flames, and he grabbed the hatchet and rushed over. The monk recited Amitabha, and the Buddha beads in his hand seemed to have gathered a huge force to smash it directly. At the same time, a series of Buddha shadows appeared around the monk, forming a very strong aura and extremely terrifying pressure. The monk, it is true that one is not fighting alone. After absorbing the cultivation and body of the masters of Qinglong Temple, the monk has inherited all their methods and magical powers. One person is equivalent to an army. For the current monks, it's really not an exaggeration. Back off, leave Chico's and Zack alone, let's go first. Janek chose to retreat again at this time. Before, he wanted to evacuate the people who came this time, but now he just wanted to get out as soon as possible, because at that moment, Layman and Cheap Janek, who had received light blessings from everyone including Kos, sensed that the blessing he had given to Lyman disappeared. This means a very simple thing, that is, there is a big problem on Lehman's side, and he may be extremely seriously injured, or even, he may die. This news is enough to completely shock Janek's mind. 5 high-level strong men came here in a group, and one person has already died. You must know that it is extremely difficult to kill a high-level strong man, so either all of them the news was wrong. One of the 2 Dongfang bosses suddenly appeared in Chengdu. Or maybe a large number of Dongfang's high-level listeners had already reacted before and surrounded and killed Lehman. No matter how hard Janek tried, he couldn't imagine that Lehman was forcibly consumed by Subai. Macron was a little surprised by Janek's reaction. This was really too abnormal. Even if it was dangerous here, even if this was Eastern territory, there was no need for him and others to be so cowed, right? But seeing that Lehman was very determined this time and started to retreat directly without waiting for his reaction. Macron was not stupid. He couldn't die in the face of the monk and the other 2 Eastern listeners who had already rushed over. Hold on, so just follow Janek and retreat quickly. Sure enough, Janek saw that the monks and the others were not chasing him, but were moving towards Zack and the Cat Demon's battle group. This group of Easterners should also be eager to rescue the Cat Demon. But at this moment, a bloody light suddenly shot out from diagonally in front and rushed directly towards Janek, who was farthest away. Janek's eyes condensed and his heart sank. Is there another Eastern audience here? Wrong. This person's murderous intention is so strong. The bloody light was like a fierce tiger, seemingly eager to devour Janek. Arrogant Easterners. Janek raised the wand in his hand, and a round of sun appeared, spreading out with himself as the center, and the bloody light continued to hit the sun without hesitation. In an instant, the scorching temperature of the sun and the crazy rejection of evil attributes began to take effect. The blood was constantly being evaporated and destroyed, but it was still reuniting and continuing to die. Rush. It's true that you can't become a Buddha without going crazy. Macron, who followed Janek to retreat away from the others, rushed over at this moment, and his buffalo-like body directly hit the bloody light, but then, Macron let out a scream and fell down, At the same time, Janek felt his son tremble, and a ray of blood pierced through, turned into a cold light, and swept across his chest. Janek shuddered and stepped back. In the end, this quick and somewhat unreasonable confrontation ended temporarily, and the evacuation process of Janek and Macron was interrupted by this extremely blunt method. The blood light dissipated, revealing Sudbai's figure. His body was extremely broken, more than half of it was burned away, and the bones had melted in some places. On his left hand, there was a mass of fresh flesh. There was a big hole in Macron's chest below, but Macron was also holding something in his palm, which was Sudbai's heart. Sudbai turned his head, looked at Janek, and then at Macron. He didn't seem to mind his current embarrassed appearance at all, but looked at the monk on the other side of the auspicious battlefield with dark red eyes again. Fatty and others. He opened his mouth and said, "Leave no one behind." Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 988. Sudbai rushed back at the most critical moment. His timely appearance not only brought a high-level immediate combat capability, but also represented a decision, or in other words, a choice. Leave no one behind. What Sudbai wants to do is to kill them all. At this moment, the fat man slapped his chest with one arm, and his own blood began to reintegrate into the formation. He even expanded the formation that used his own blood as an altar without any scruples, covering this large area. If the opponent forcibly breaks the formation, Fatty will suffer terrible backlash, and may even be in danger of falling, but Fatty is now fearless. After all, the purpose of this group of Westerners this time is to touch the little guy and his fat man's godson. As the godfather, if the fat man still thinks about having the nerve to tease the little guy after he is rescued from the orphanage, he, at this time, must not be cowardly. Besides, before Sudbai didn't come, everyone here was not in an advantageous situation, so it was right to give priority to protecting the little guy. But now that Sudbai is back, then we have to let those Westerners see why the flowers are so red. The demonic flames around Buddha's body reappeared, and the hatchet in his hand once again swung in a new arc. Maybe after this battle, Buddha's body will be exhausted until he enters the next story world before he can recover, but Buddha doesn't care anymore. People come to bully you. The clay figurine also has a certain amount of anger, not to mention the Buddha, who is not very good-tempered to begin with. The monk didn't have any special performance, but before he advanced some time ago, Sudbai and Fatty helped him a lot and protected him several times. Furthermore, even if these favors aside, the little guy was stolen by Jamie May under his nose. This kind of thing almost happened a second time. Although the monk's expression remained normal, the killing intent in his heart was already ready. Fatty stayed where he was and continued to maintain the formation to control, while Foy and the monk went straight to Jixiang's side. The monk's combat power alone was enough to suppress a high-level strong man, and with the help of the elusive Jixiang and the physically powerful Foy, at this time, facing the two high-level players Chicos and Zack, they were still not at any disadvantage. At the same time, Fatty's formation also tilted this way, and all kinds of negative attributes were forcibly thrown at Chicos and Zack. Everyone's point of view is actually very clear, that is, Sudbai can resist the other two by himself, while the rest of the group concentrates their efforts on dealing with the two of them, trying their best to eliminate one of them first and cut off the other's immediate combat power. Chen Guang had deserted somewhere. Although Fatty could be sure that Chen Guang had not gone far, since he didn't take action now, he probably felt that the situation was not completely clear yet. The listeners are all selfish masters, as is Chen Guang, and so are the Western listeners who had just come in force but suddenly saw that the situation was not good and planned to withdraw. And now, if it weren't for the fact that the other party wanted to take action against the little guy, it would threaten the little guy. To ensure their safety, Fatty and his gang might not be so united and determined to kill the enemy at all costs. The situation over there is naturally great, but Subai is under great pressure. In fact, Subai can choose an easier way to deal with it, such as avoiding head-on confrontation and entangling them, but he just solved it with Subai, who was on the verge of Lehman's return, still chose the simplest and craziest style of play at this time. In every confrontation between the two sides, Macron and Pjanic were able to injure and even severely injure Subai to a certain extent, but Subai could also extract some interest from them. With the experience of dealing with Lehman before, Subai seemed to be at a disadvantage in this battle, but every time Subai was able to come back at an extremely fast speed. Pjanic and Macron now feel that Subai is more difficult to deal with than dogskin plaster, and he also carries strong corrosive venom. After every fight, they can find that no matter how they work together to repel him, the other party can always defeat him. He left some injuries on his body. This is a madman, a complete madman. Unless you have a boss-level audience, you can't kill him at all. His resilience is really terrifying. This is the thought in Macron's mind, and it is also the thought in Pjanic's mind. But what Pjanic thinks more about is that if the Chinese audience named Subai in front of him also proves the truth in the future, then how terrible is it? You have to know that you are teaming up with Macron and at the same time, the two of you are still at a higher level than the other person. You feel a little powerless like this. What would it be like if you wait until the other person also advances to a high level? After the other party achieves enlightenment, does it mean that even other big guys have nothing to do against him? Perhaps the only weakness of this guy named Subai is his realm. Once his realm is sufficient, he may not be the strongest listener in the real world, but he will definitely be the listener least likely to fall. In fact, the latter can often echo the former, a listener who is least likely to be killed, who can say he is not strong. In fact, if there is one person between Pjanic and Macron who can take the initiative to stay and stop Subai after the break, then the other person can leave in style. Although Zach and Chicos over there are also a little bit confused. Suppression, but the problem is not big. No matter the llama, the fat man, the monk, or the cat demon, it is impossible for him to take care of himself at this time. But the problem is that Subai is now showing no fear of death, and the more he fights, the braver and crazier he becomes. Pjanic and Macron both have a hunch in their hearts, that is, if anyone stays, it is likely to end the situation. The original 2-on-1 suppression will turn into a 1-on-1 balanced situation, but with that unimaginable resilience, the opponent will be consumed by him sooner or later. Lyman. Correct. Is this also the reason why Lyman did it? Pjanic seemed to have figured out something, and was immediately shocked. He had previously thought that Lehman was trapped in the hands of a certain Eastern boss or was surrounded by high-level Eastern listeners, but now it seems that Lehman was trapped. Man was probably defeated in frustration in the long battle of attrition against this perverted guy. In fact, even though Subai recovered from serious injuries and rushed forward without hesitation, Subai himself was also tired. Although he won the war of attrition with Lyman, he was really exhausted physically and mentally. At this time, the same mechanical cycle of fighting, injury, recovery, fighting again, and injury began again. It can be said that Subai's consciousness has gradually begun to blur. His vitality has not weakened, but his whole person has become a little dizzy. It means sleepiness. But Subai's murderous intention is still strong. In this sick state, Subai is like a high-speed sports car driven by fatigue. The driver has fallen asleep, but the sports car is still driving forward, unless it hits someone. There is a big iron plate or there is a cliff ahead, otherwise it would be impossible to stop. From the overall effect, this action has failed. Lyman may have paid a huge price, and may even have perished. From a consequentialist perspective, this is a very irrational and stupid action, but if the time is pushed forward 2 days, maybe these high-level Western experts really don't think there is anything wrong with their plan. First of all, they maintained a certain degree of restraint, and secondly, Their ultimate goal was to get that thing. It would be an absolute surprise if they could destroy the orphanage by threatening to destroy the orphanage and let Subai sacrifice himself to directly complete the mission of that thing. Perhaps they were greedy because of this, but the difficulty level of this operation was indeed very low before the operation. It was just that the plan could not keep up with the changes. One after another, the Eastern audience seemed to have been stabbed in the back regardless of the situation. Regardless of his strength, he was very tenacious, but Subai, who had been threatened by sacrifice before, showed a frightening will and ability. Janek knew that despite the fact that Chicos and Zack were not in crisis yet, he and Macron could also suppress Subai, but several strange auras had actually appeared nearby, including one the pressure brought by the breath is even more extraordinary. This is, the breath of a strong man who is about to achieve enlightenment. The impact of the fighting here will definitely alarm the senior listeners in the Southwest region. Some people have even come over, but they chose to wait and see for the time being and did not directly join the battle. However, invisibly, the situation of Janek and others has changed. It started to become more and more subtle, and the original plan of getting the item and leaving quickly was completely ruined. For this reason, Janek directly triggered the set of scrolls on his body, which are the scrolls of the law of space. After the departure of the previous generation of bosses, no audience in the real world has been able to create this again. This is also it is enough to show the preciousness of this scroll, but Janek is a very straightforward person. Whether he ordered a quick attack without leaving any room after the fat man came out, or he decisively prepared to retreat and give up the operation later, he showed that he belongs to him. Decisive. The message has been sent out, now let's wait for the formation over there to respond. The reaction speed is quite fast. At this time, a woman wearing navy blue mountaineering clothing walked out slowly. Didn't I just go to the laboratory under Lagu Lake to inhale the essence for a while? I didn't expect it to be so lively when I came back. Chen Ryu gently tilted her neck and made a series of crisp sounds. Lagu Lake is located in Sichuan. Moreover, Chen Ryu definitely did not come back just in time to catch up like the monk. She must have been attracted by so many high-level listeners here. The momentum caused by the melee was alarming. When the fat man who was controlling the formation to help the monk saw Chen Ryu's appearance, his nose was so beautiful that the mucus bubbled up. He immediately shouted to Chen Ryu very affectionately as if he were seeing a living bodhisattva. "Sister Chen, you are finally here, I am your loyal fat man. If you call yourself such a disgusting person again, I will immediately quit and stand aside to continue watching the show." The loyal fatty felt very hurt. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 989. Chen Ryu's timely appearance almost gave the final tone to this nondescript duel. It's no wonder that Fatty was so happy that his nose was bubbling at this time, because he knew how terrifying Chen Ryu's true strength was, which was no less than the existence of a junior big boss. However, Fatty was also a little surprised, because Chen Ryu did not belong to their circle. This woman had always been independent. The reason why she helped Subai in the first place was because of the tombstone inheritance and ancient zombies that Subai could bring to her. The third transformation technique, but after that time she no longer owed Subai anything, so she was an outsider. As an outsider, suddenly become a live Thunder Fang? I can't figure this out, especially when this kind of thing happens to the audience. It stands to reason that Chen Ryu, like the few high-level listeners from the Southwest who have arrived nearby, watching the excitement is the most appropriate choice in the listener's mentality. At most, after the battle situation becomes clear, for example, he can beat him up here. The other party can come and participate under the great banner of Oriental listeners unite with the outside world. However, these things are all trivial matters. The most important thing now is to end this war. Chen Ryu glanced at the battlefield. She was not in a hurry to help Subai first, but went to the monk's side. In fact, She was also very surprised by Sudbai's current improvement, and she knew that Sudbai was now, although she was in a bad state, she could still carry 2 high-level experts. This kind of improvement could no longer be described as speed, and she could sense that Sudbai was still in the middle level. The monk was also a little surprised by Chen Ryu's appearance, but he didn't mind having a powerful immediate combat force on his side. At that moment, the monk no longer left any room, and took action with all his strength. For a while, he suppressed Chico's and kept retreating. As for Zako's, well, with Jixiang and Buddha under control, it won't be a big problem in a short period of time. Chico's knew that he was no match for this monk, but the awareness of both parties was not particularly great. The monk could suppress him but could not really injure him. But at this moment, a woman's figure appeared like a ghost. Behind him, a sudden chill ran down Chico's back. The sixth sense he had developed during countless life and death crises was already giving him a frantic warning, but it was already too late. Chen Ryu blocked the surrounding area in an instant and kicked him over at the same time. This seemingly simple kick seemed to contain a kind of principle of heaven and earth, as if it could make mountains and rivers collapse. The monk's eyes were focused. He could feel that Chen Ryu seemed to have made some breakthroughs during the time he left, and his strength had improved a little. Of course, Chen Ryu still failed to prove the truth. Moreover, for the level of advanced listeners, Chen Ryu's strength has exceeded the definition of strength at this level. Crack. Chico's body was almost cut off by his waist at this time, just like the scene of an ordinary person being hit by a car and flying out. However, because the surrounding space was blocked by Chen Ryu, Chico's didn't fly much. Far away, only 3 or 4 meters away at most, it was blocked by an invisible wall. Chen Ryu took a step forward again, without any need for the monk to take action or the fat man's response. She squatted down and grabbed one of Chico's feet like an eagle catching a chicken. A hexagonal star-killing array appeared in front of Chico's, intending to forcefully repel Chen Ryu and at least give himself some breathing space. This woman is really terrifying. When facing her, you even feel like they were all so suppressed that they couldn't breathe. But Chen Ryu's formation skills are not even comparable to those of a fat man and a monk. Back then, she was able to open the formations outside the place of enlightenment and enter the place of enlightenment. This was something that even most of the big guys couldn't do. 2 things. When Chico's formation faced Chen Ryu, it was like a layer of window paper that was easily pierced by Chen Ryu. Then, what followed was an extremely simple and crude scene that even seemed crude and beautiful. Boom. 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 Chen Ryu grabbed Chico's ankle with one hand and began to slam it back and forth. The fat man swallowed subconsciously. He originally thought about whether he should use his own formation to help Chen Ryu, such as weakening Chico's defense or interfering with him. But after seeing this scene, the fat man suddenly felt I am a bit redundant. However, the fat man's suspicion arose again. This woman. Why are you working so hard this time? Do you really regard yourself as this big collective? But she doesn't know the little guy, and she's not his godmother. The scene where Chen Ryu completely defeated Chico's not only shocked the fat man, but also shocked everyone inside and outside the battle. Zack, who was resisting the siege of Jixiang, Foya and Monk, was even more frightened. His face was extremely solemn, because he felt that this woman who suddenly appeared, even if she was not a big shot, had strength that was no less than that of a big shot. Now, Chico's situation is much more miserable. Although he is thrown to the ground every time, the real damage actually comes from Chen Ryu's own control of power. Even if Chico's is not a physical enhancer, he has never been injured. He wouldn't die if he fell downstairs, or even have any problems, but now he felt like a piece of dough being kneaded back and forth by Chen Ryu. His body and soul were already at the extreme point of being torn apart. He really never thought that he would encounter such a terrifying person during this trip to the east. Click. Finally, Chico's body, which was not considered strong among the high-level audience, was completely torn apart at this time, and his soul subconsciously wanted to escape, but a bronze dagger appeared in Chen Ru's palm without hesitation. Stabbed into his remains. In an instant, Chico's soul was forcibly detained on the broken body, unable to move. Chen Ru glanced at the fat man and pointed at this. "Oh, okay, I'll reinforce the seal," you continue. The fat man immediately stepped forward like a pony to reinforce the seal on Chico's remains. At this time, Chen Ru turned around gracefully and walked towards Zack. Zack wanted to escape, but the monk was able to suppress him on his own, and the desperate Buddha and Jixiang were nearby to block him, making it impossible for Zack himself to escape. And when Chen Ru approached him again, he directly chose to use the secret method to forcefully activate his potential. Even if he ended up losing his rank, he had to get away from here. Boom. Facing Zack, whose aura was greatly increased after using the secret technique, the monk attacked him without hesitation. For a moment, the monk spit out a mouthful of golden blood from the corner of his mouth, and his body fell back like a kite with a broken string. Zack seemed to have no problem. He was seriously injured, but he knew that the monk was willing to risk serious injuries to offset the effect he had just activated with his secret method. This monk was determined to create conditions for the woman to deal with him. Chen Ru lived up to the monk's kindness. When she and Zack got close, this man whose main focus was on strengthening the physical body finally understood what a truly terrifying physical body was in front of Chen Ru. Boom. Zack was pinned directly to the ground by Chen Ru, and the whole earth trembled at this moment, as if it was a sign that an earthquake was about to erupt. Chen Ru lifted Zack up again, grabbing Zack's neck with one hand and grabbing Zack's belly with the other, and then... Tear. Foy and Jixiang wanted to go up and help, but found that they had no room to help at all. The monk who had just stood up and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth looked at Chen Ru, who was showing off her power. He was also shocked. This woman was indeed a little unusual today. The improvement of her strength was on the one hand, but this kind of direct attack without saying a word, using the most extreme means to attack these Western audiences, is also a puzzling point. The eyes of the fat man and the monk met at this moment, and both sides saw a look of confusion in the other's eyes. Chen Ru didn't care about this. She was like a knight, drawing a sword to help when there was an injustice. It seemed that she was doing the most common thing. Then, she looked at Macron and Pjanik, who were being dragged by Subai. Macron was heartbroken and stopped cooperating with Pjanik. Even at this time, he did not dare to continue waiting with Pjanik for the opening of the reception circle and fled directly in the other direction. Subai did not chase him, but continued to deal with Pjanik, but Chen Ru appeared in front of Macron in an instant. Facing Macron's huge and powerful body, her white and slender the hand seemed so insignificant, but it penetrated Macron's entire body in an instant, and threw it out casually like a skewer of candied haws. She, big boss, big boss. Macron, who was knocked down, wanted to do something, but found that he could not move at all. A terrible force was crazily destroying the foundation of his physical existence. When I first faced Chico's, there was a lot of back and forth. When I faced Zack, I crushed him directly. When I faced Macron again, I actually hit it with one blow. Foye pursed his lips and came up with a very scary conclusion. Fact, her strength is improving rapidly. Yes, Chen Ru's strength was clearly improved in this battle as she defeated the enemies in front of her one after another. This is the most unimaginable thing that really happened before her eyes. Pjanik burned his wand directly and sacrificed it. A figure of a light magic god appeared and blocked Subeg. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Pjanik quickly retreated and opened some distance, but Subai penetrated through again without any reservation, even though there were more bones on Subai's body than there were flesh parts at this time. Madman, madman, they are all madman. Just when Pjanik himself almost collapsed, a ray of light appeared at his feet. Formation teleportation. Turn on. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 990. The appearance of Chen Ryu made the previous mess completely meaningless. Whether it was the persistence of Fatty and others at the beginning, the restraint in the middle period, the angry counterattack at the end, or the restraint at the beginning and the desperate move by Zack and others, the melee in which you hesitated and we finally had to fight was quickly brought to an end in the hands of this woman. This speed and crispness made both parties somewhat unexpected. Chicos was still lying on the ground and was sealed, and Zack and Macron were seriously injured and dying, unable to resist. The only fish that escaped the net, Pjanik, seemed to have been favored by the goddess of luck when Macron ran away like a gamble. He waited for the moment when the formation was activated and was about to return to the west. However, Subai rushed over without hesitation again at this time, holding Pjanik's shoulder with one hand, but the violent shaking in the formation prevented Subai from continuing the offensive. The light of the formation also enveloped it. Pjanik sneered at this. In fact, he seemed to be very sunny and well educated. At this time, he showed his fierce look, with a pair of eyes filled with deep resentment. He can naturally sense Subai's strong murderous intention towards him, but as long as Subai continues to entangle and eventually goes to the west with him, everyone's situation will be completely reversed. Just as the East is the East for Eastern listeners, the West is also the territory of Western listeners. Why do the two parties interact with each other with deep restraint? The reason is simple. This may be a rule that radio listeners have adhered to for generations. That is, if a listener crosses the line between the East and the West and commits excessive behavior, then the listener on the other side has every reason to punish him. Even strangulation. This rule may be due to the fact that radio maintains the independence of the East and the West to a great extent, because the story world styles and cultural backgrounds set by radio for Eastern and Western listeners are different. Once the communication between the listeners are allowed, if the integration is too tight, the uniqueness that broadcasters like to see will be lost. However, this rule has not been broken before. It was as small as a few bodhisattvas in India who crossed the border and wanted to capture the monks who had not advanced. In the end, Zhao Bianan directly beat them back. To the big ones, Lychee wiped out a city in England many years ago. Are all examples. Chen Ryu's figure also appeared nearby, and at the same time, she put one hand on Subai's shoulder, like a lovable woman leaning on her boyfriend's broad shoulders. Chen Ryu didn't feel that her behavior was inappropriate, and she didn't even feel that her behavior from the time she appeared on the scene was strange. She was as calm as the sea before the storm. This was not in line with her usual style, so inside there must be a deeper reason. In this kind of space teleportation formation, it is difficult to fully release the power to form an effective attack effect, because most of the power will leak out and you don't know where it will eventually be squeezed into the space to wreak havoc, but this a special case should not include Chen Ryu. She should be fully capable of using her profound knowledge of formations to terminate this teleportation at this time, but Chen Ryu did nothing and remained calm and quiet. Buddha and the monk looked at each other. The two were currently busy sealing and strengthening the high-level powerhouses on the ground, but the scene happening in front of them actually revealed enough information. Subai simply didn't want Pjanik to escape. No matter where he teleported to, he would pursue him without hesitation. This was a big adventure, because if nothing unexpected happened, Pjanik would definitely be teleported back. Western, but Subai making this choice in this state is really in line with his usual style. As for Chen Ryu, they really couldn't understand her timely appearance, her resolute actions, and her sloppiness at this time. It seemed that this woman was controlling the rhythm of the whole thing. At the moment, it is not so much that Pjanik has successfully activated the formation and is preparing to leave. Subai will kill Pjanik even if he chases him to the west. It is better to say that Chen Ryu, a woman, has taken a ride. She could have prevented Pjanik from leaving, and there was no need for Subai to continue chasing him, but Pjanik seemed to be a bus to her, and Subai was her ticket. Lord Buddha, monk, why do I feel like something is wrong? Fatty muttered, I always feel like this woman plays some role in this matter. I am a swordsman and fish meat. The monk just said these words, and then looked at Chen Ryu over there with a slightly fearful look. The Buddha also nodded, and he agreed with this point of view. Even if Chen Ryu just stood on the side and helped beat the drums, that would still make everyone understand, but if she directly entered the scene and actively became the protagonist and killed everyone, then there must be something fishy, as if she had designed all this. Same. However, even if you find some evidence at this time, you still can't do anything. Strength is your only confidence in speaking. If you don't have enough strength, you are not even qualified to sit on the negotiating table. Subai, whose half-face had not yet recovered, turned his head and looked at the plain and quiet woman standing next to him. He opened his mouth and wanted to shout something, but before he could make any sound, the white light disappeared. Disappeared together. There are also Pjanik, Subai and Chen Ryu. The fat man sat directly on the ground, covering the huge torn wound on his shoulder with one hand and softly shouting in pain. The demonic flames around Buddha also completely disappeared, and he fell to the ground as if he was exhausted. Jixiang's body was split into two parts, turning into his sluggish self and the equally sluggish Ruyi. The monk was also injured, but he was much better than the other people. At that moment, he took on the task of strengthening the seals on these three high-level Western powerful men. It was not that he did not want to kill them directly, but because the things over there were actually it's not over yet. Besides, instead of killing these guys with a knife, there are actually more valuable ways to gain greater and better benefits for yourself. High-level monsters or other beings are difficult to find, even in the story world, and it is difficult to capture them. So, these three guys who are dying and have lost all resistance are no different from three heavenly and earthly treasures. Unless the broadcast calls them into the story world at the next moment, there is no problem in delaying for a while. In addition, the incident with the blood corpse has learned from the past. Whether you delay or not, it has the same meaning for the broadcast. St. Paul's Cathedral in London is the first church in the UK and one of the 5 cathedrals in the world. At this time, in the core area of the church that is never open to visitors, a middle-aged man wearing a white robe is floating cross-legged. There was a teleportation formation in front of him, with a simple and mysterious atmosphere. This formation was not made by this generation of listeners. It is said that it has been passed down for a long time. It seems that a certain boss-level listener who was proficient in formations from previous generations transplanted it here from a secret realm and sealed it. Over the years, it has been urged there are not many opportunities, because each time it is activated, it is expensive. Regarding formations, especially space formations, in fact, broadcasting has always maintained a suppressive attitude. The listeners are like the rats raised in glass bottles by the radio. Naturally, it is impossible to allow these rats to dig holes and get out at will, so recently in recent years, even the most amazing and talented array enhancement system can only create some long-distance teleportation arrays. As for the legendary teleportation array to another world, it is simply impossible to do so. Come out. The middle-aged man was actually activating the formation. Finally, a white light appeared in the formation. The first one to come out was Pjanik, who was in a state of embarrassment. Come out. The middle-aged man looked at Pjanik with a look of surprise in his eyes. He knew that since Pjanik asked him to activate this expensive teleportation circle, he must have encountered an emergency, but he did not expect it. How could Pjanik find himself in such a miserable state? Even the light wand he carried was missing. Close the seal. Pjanik glanced back, and then left the church directly. The middle-aged man did not hesitate at all, let alone ask questions. He made a hand with his hands, intending to seal the formation, but he suddenly found that the formation could not be closed. A figure collided directly with him. Boom! The middle-aged man had just advanced to become a high-level listener. When faced with this collision, his whole body felt dizzy and his body flew backwards. Then he saw an Oriental man appearing in front of him. The other party unceremoniously stretched out his hand to strangle his neck and asked in English, "Where did that guy go?" The middle-aged man was still hesitating whether to answer the other party. He seemed to have difficulty understanding the situation in front of him. This is the West. But a woman's hand suddenly stretched out and pressed directly on his head. Boom! The middle-aged man's figure exploded directly, and his soul was also wiped out. Not even a high-level powerhouse can be her enemy in one round, let alone a little thing who has just advanced to become a high-level listener. Subai looked at Chen Ryu. "I can sense where he is running to, and I can help you chase him." "Does this matter have anything to do with you?" Subai asked. "I'm not lychee. If I had so many twists and turns, wouldn't I still be stuck in the path of enlightenment and never be able to take that step?" Chen Ryu looked at Subai with a smile. "I want to say, all of this it was just a coincidence, believe it or not. But I did find an opportunity that allowed me to achieve enlightenment. That is, through your cause and effect, you can prove the Tao through killing. I will help you kill anyone who stops you from killing that guy. The more, the better." There was a glimmer of light in Chen Ryu's calm eyes. "Keep killing until I prove the truth." Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 991. Subai squatted down, and the blood and minced meat of the low-level audience member who had just been crushed by Chen Ryu on the ground began to weather quickly, and wisps of bloody smell began to gather on Subai. Subai was deeply moved. Taking a breath, it was like an extremely tired person applying a handful of essential oil on the tip of his nose to lift his spirits. It seems that the side effects of the third level of Ancient Zombie have been resolved. Chen Ryu looked at Subai's current state and said, "If you continue with this habit, you may actually be dead by then, but you are still alive, and your soul is integrated with your body, so even if you die, you can still continue to live. This is a terrible inertia." Chen Ryu still didn't say anything, which was that this was probably the reason why Su Fuegui could continue to lie in the place of enlightenment for so many years even though he had died long ago. "Does this matter really have nothing to do with you?" Subai's eyes were bright. He didn't mind letting Chen Ryu ride on his karma and kill when he was seeking revenge, but he had to make sure that this matter was not Chen Ryu's. It was deliberately arranged. The thing that Subai hated the most was being used as a chess piece by others, because he had lived this kind of life for long enough. "Your high-spirited state is really surprising. Although your consciousness is filled with the desire to kill, you have become extremely sober," Chen Ryu teased, and then she laughed again. "I just had some breakthroughs and insights in that place. It happened that at this time, those Westerners took the initiative to cross the border. In fact, even without your karma, as an Eastern listener, I can still go after him, but with your help cause and effect is just more convenient. I must preach, and I am now regarded as one of the preachers, and preachers are given the responsibility of stabilizing an area by the broadcast. Furthermore, the provocation and opposition between the East and the West are also tacitly approved by the broadcast. Away. Finally, I would like to take a step back and say, if you think this was arranged by me, according to my character and approach, I will not let these stupid Westerners get things to this point by being hesitant. I will let them directly destroy your orphanage and destroy your son. When the time comes, I don't believe you will still have the mind to consider whether it was my design as you do now. You will only want to kill them crazily, even if kneel before me and ask for my help. Chen Ryu's words were very direct and a bit cold, but it seemed that this was the only way to completely offset Subai's suspicion. Indeed, with Chen Ryu's character and style, if this game was designed by her, she would not have designed it to fail like this, nor would she have fallen into this situation. Even if she took action later, who would win in the end and who would lose to Subai? It is unknown whether anyone here will die. Help me, kill him, Subai said. It's an honor. Chen Ryu smiled slightly. He ran in that direction. You run slower. It's best to try to help him find more helpers. You have actually reached your limit this time, but if you keep chasing like this and sacrifice yourself with the blood and lives of high-level listeners, I think you have a high chance of breaking through to a high level in this opportunity. In fact, you are already at the stage of breaking through. I'm worried about you. Even if there are no big bosses in the West now, this is the West after all. What will happen if you are suppressed or killed in the end? If you don't prove the Tao, you'd rather die. Chen Ryu seemed very free and easy. Back then, Lichi went to England to wipe out a city. Today, I, Chen Ryu, will kill people in and out of Europe until I prove it. Road. Subai could feel that Chen Ryu was desperate this time, and she might not know the purpose of General Qin's armor. In fact, she could not borrow Subai's cause and effect to come to the West to kill people. She could kill a lot and then use General Qin. The characteristics of the armor send a signal over there. At that time, the radio will definitely reshuffle its audience destruction plan. As long as Chen Ryu can successfully achieve enlightenment, the radio will at most set more restrictions for her or even seal her into a certain story world. A powerful enlightened person was destroyed with a waste of natural resources. This society, this world, even this broadcast seems to have a virtue. Call. Hills breathed a sigh of relief. The armor in front of him that resembled that of Saint Seiya was finally repaired by him. This feeling was really great, as if he had recreated an exquisite work of art. It's like a gun enthusiast collecting an old gun with collectible value and refinishing it. There has just been a special energy wave coming from the direction of London. Chris came over with a cup of coffee in her hand and said, "She is Hill's maid and has the strength of a veteran." "I feel it." Hills nodded. His lifestyle is actually very similar to Subai's. He doesn't like to cause trouble and likes to be alone, so he is not too concerned about many changes outside. If nothing else happens, the direction of the energy fluctuation should be Paul's Cathedral. "I heard that there is a teleportation circle hidden there," Chris said. "Yes, a magic circle left over from the Macedonian Empire was discovered by a big boss in the previous generation in a secret realm and transplanted to St. Paul's Cathedral. It's just that the cost of opening that thing is too high. Really, it's better to take a plane." Hills took a small brush to brush away the dust on the holy robe in front of him. "So, did someone use that magic circle?" Chris asked. "Chris, you talk a bit too much today," Hills asked with a smile. "I'm sorry. As you know, I am also a practitioner of formations. The reason why I am following you is because I hope to learn things about formations from you. Therefore, I hope to learn from you that I can go to St. Paul's Church to understand the formations." Qualifications. You can go, just say I arranged it. Generally speaking, it is not open to people below the senior audience. Hills waved his hand, indicating that the conversation could be ended. He needed to concentrate all his attention on the holy robe in front of you. Chrissy smiled slightly and was about to leave, but at this moment, a strong aura was moving quickly towards the side. Even Chris, a veteran, sensed this aura, let alone Hills himself. "Go outside and take a look," Hills said. Chrissy nodded, and when she was about to go out, she suddenly found that her feet began to tremble. Then, a white light began to rush in crazily, and the surrounding formations began to work to stop him. "Janik, what are you going to do?" Hills waved his palm, and a hole opened in the formation. An anxious figure of Pjanik appeared in front of him. It could be seen that he was desperately squeezing the formation. The meaning was very simple, that is, let Hills quickly and completely complete the formation. Open the formation and let him in. Save me, Hills, save me, the Orientals are coming, the Orientals are coming. Hills was a little confused. This is Manchester, England. How could an Oriental come out of nowhere to kill you? And you yourself are also a high-level powerhouse. Isn't it the boss who dares to come here to hunt you down? Hills vaguely remembered getting some specious information. 2 big bosses had appeared in the east. Forward. Hills hesitated for a moment and did not activate the formation, but said directly, "Who is chasing you?" "Sudbai, woman, Sudbai, that woman." Pjanik shouted anxiously, "Hiles, I am willing to pay any price to ask for your protection." "Sudbai," Hills chewed on the name, and then he couldn't laugh or cry, "he came to kill you." "Yes, he came to kill me. He followed the formation and came back with me. He hasn't given up on chasing me yet. Quick, open the formation and let me in. Hills, please." Hills shook his head helplessly and said, "Well, I'm really sorry, I really can't open the door for you." "Hiles, are you willing to watch the Easterners kill people on our Western territory?" Pjanik roared. "I'm a Westerner, but my relationship with him is more special. I'm sorry." Hills directly closed the formation, and Hill's shadow in front of him was forcefully pushed out. Standing outside the gate of the villa, Pjanik stomped the ground angrily, sensing the approaching breath behind him. He quickly thought about what other high-end listeners there were in England, and then quickly turned into a white light and left here. If the audience here in England can't stop him, then he can only choose to continue to divert trouble to the east. If he can't do it, he can go to France, Italy, Germany, Spain, and Portugal. He doesn't believe it. Those 2 Orientals really dare to continue hunting down. Pjanik may not have thought at all that the reason why the other party has not caught up with him is just waiting for him to run away and find helpers. Chen Ru's sword is hungry and thirsty. If it had been before, naturally there is no such opportunity, but the train has just started and there is no big boss in the West for the time being. This opportunity can also be said to be a rare one. "Mr. Hills, are you really on such a good terms with that Mr. Sudbai? Do you know why I am so anxious to restore the set of holy clothes?" Hills asked. Chrissy shook her head. "I'm going to wear this Shenji and go find that guy for a duel. So now. Pjanik is also a high-level person. He can scare Pjanik like this. Do you think I can stop him?" This time there were 5 of them, and now only Pjanik came back with the help of the teleportation circle of St. Paul's Cathedral, and was also being chased. "That guy is a psychopath, what kind of trouble could I get into now?" According to the law, if someone is mentally ill and stabs someone, their sentence can be reduced. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 992. For ordinary people, the strait is equivalent to a natural chasm if they do not rely on equipment, but for listeners, especially advanced listeners, this little distance is nothing at all, but Pjanik can be sure that this time it was the first time before I became a listener and after I became a listener that I crossed the English Channel in such embarrassment. But no matter how he speeds up, no matter what method he uses, the 2 auras chasing him still keep a stable distance from him, just like a wolf on the prairie hunting prey, using this method to keep going. Driving the prey here and there and finally exhausting its energy. However, Pjanik still has hope in his heart. Ahead, several powerful auras were coming this way. A look of surprise appeared on Pjanik's face. He sent a distress signal to a close friend of his in Paris, but what is certain is that the other party, even if he came to help without hesitation, he couldn't have arrived so quickly. It could only be that senior listeners living on the French border or in the Netherlands and Belgium sensed the aura of the two Orientals to find out the situation. Whether in the East or the West, fights between high-level listeners are rare, let alone such a big chase. The strong and unabashed aura of both sides has spread from England to here. The listeners in the nearby area must be sensed. The evil Easterners are behind me. They are coming to trample on our dignity. Stop them and kill them. Janek shouted to the figures in front of him. Janek. One of the slightly older men looked at Janek, who was like a bereaved dog, with a look of contemplation in his eyes, but he didn't say anything more, didn't even ask anything more, and didn't express much. The audience is not an army, and they don't even have narrow regional and racial concepts. Therefore, things and emotions such as fearing death for the dignity of the East or the West will not appear in the audience. Therefore, Janek's slogan cannot really have much inciting effect. However, when Janek passed quickly, the five figures represented by the old man continued to stay in place. They wanted to see what kind of existence could scare the high-level powerhouse Janek into this. Look. Sure enough, when he saw the pursuer clearly, the old man also had a look of surprise on his face. He is actually an Oriental. How dare they dare to be in the West? The old man stretched out his hand without giving up his position, but asked in a slightly pleasant tone. Excuse me, two friends, what do you mean? It stands to reason that the old man's attitude cannot be said to be bad. After all, this is the territory of the West. For you two Eastern listeners to unscrupulously hunt down the strong Westerners here, it is indeed a bit of a slap in the face of the Western listener circle. But the old man has been very restrained. He feels that he just did what he should do in his status. As for whether to help Janek block or win these two Eastern listeners, he has not decided yet, but it is probably no, at least not with all his strength. After all, judging from the aura, one of the two Eastern listeners has an intermediate aura, the other has a high-level aura, and there are 5 people on his side, including himself. There are 2 middle-level and low-level players. If they want to take down the other 2, they really need a pair of good teeth. Back away within 10 seconds, otherwise I will think you are going to help him. Subai didn't talk nonsense, he was fierce and direct, his words were full of provocation, and he didn't care about the other person's face at all. This attitude was a bit like a street gangster flicking cigarette ashes at the police station chief. He said very arrogantly, I heard that you are very cool. When the old man heard this, he was stunned for a moment, and then a surge of anger rose in his heart. The opposition between East and West was initially an opposition based on rules, and it was also a cultural opposition forcibly created by radio. The distinction between the background of Fang's story world also leads to big differences, such as magic and fighting spirit. Few people in the East strengthen this, while in the West, few people practice Taoism and become monks. Rules and opposition are fundamental. As time passes and generations of grievances accumulate, that kind of emotion and the opposition between ethnic groups will slowly emerge. If Subai persuades him kindly or lowers his head and says what is going on, he wants to hunt down Peony. Strangely, it was hard to say whether the old man would stop him, but since Subai showed such an attitude, and this was the territory of the West, the old man would not be able to show off his face if he backed away like this. To put it bluntly, why did Janek and the other 5 people obey the rules in the East before? It was because they were afraid that they would make things worse and cause the Eastern audience to attack them, so even if the old man was in a state of they suffered a bit of a loss, but they didn't think that the 5 people on their side couldn't stop the other party. Since the other party was so rude, they naturally couldn't give in. Even if they continued to fight in a stalemate, they would rush over after being sensed by the energy fluctuations. 10. After Subai finished reading 1, he jumped directly to 10, and then he rushed over. The old man let out a cold snort, and fighting energy burst out all over his body. A pure silver shield appeared on his left hand, and a short sword appeared on his right hand. This equipment looked very much like an ancient Roman gladiator. However, when the old man used his shield to resist Subai's collision and then waited for an opportunity to take action, he sensed an extremely terrifying force coming from the position of his shield. Boom! The shield actually dented at this time. Damn! This oriental body! What on earth is made of? The old man didn't hesitate at all. When his body and shield were knocked out by Subai, the dagger burning with fighting spirit pierced directly into Subai's body. Subai's body exploded immediately. All this made the old man a little confused. This oriental. Just die. The next moment, Subai appeared behind the old man, strangled the old man's neck with one hand, then exposed his fangs and stabbed directly into the old man's neck. The flames of fighting spirit in the old man kept burning Subai, but Subai was not afraid and frantically sucked the blood from the old man's body. This feeling was really pleasant. Subai suddenly found that he seemed to like the feeling of frying himself on the oil pan while tasting the blood. The old man's eyes showed panic, because he found that no matter how he attacked Subai, who was attacking him from all directions, Subai would quickly recover in the next moment. Even the ancestor-level vampires don't have such a terrifying recovery speed. But then, a scene that shocked the old man even more appeared. As soon as one of his companions was approached by the Oriental woman, his head was twisted off by the woman. At the same time, his soul was extracted, and the woman actually swallowed his soul directly. Dropped, like eating French fries while watching a movie. Immediately afterwards, the woman appeared next to one of her companions. A hand stretched out from nowhere, and always pierced the guy's chest, digging out his soul and liver together. The woman took a breath into the liver, and the liver immediately weathered, and the soul was also sucked in by it, and the woman's face showed an intoxicating look. In the past, whether it was Chicos or Macron, those high-level strongmen were no match for her in one round, let alone these small miscellaneous fish who only had mid-level and low-level now. In the blink of an eye, 3 high-level Western listeners were killed by Chen Ryu as if chopping melons and vegetables, and Chen Ryu's movements began to become more and more relaxed and freehand. Subai was still struggling with the old man, but it seemed that Chen Ryu's performance had completely shocked the old man's mind, making Subai feel that the other party's resistance to resistance had also been reduced a lot. Indeed, with Chen Ryu's current strength and attitude, she has not yet attained enlightenment. Once she attains enlightenment, she will definitely not be able to reach the level of strength of the big guys who just became enlightened. Subai will fight with the big guys he knows in his mind. Even if you are facing these high-end audiences, you won't be so chopping and cutting, right? The fourth guy wanted to escape. At this moment, he was in no mood to resist. The 3 companions were killed almost instantly. This scene was really shocking. But Chen Ryu just stood there and moved her fingers slightly. In an instant, the space around the escapee was completely sealed. Then, the space began to squeeze crazily. The listener's body and soul were strangled instantly, and a wisp of black smoke drifted toward Chen Ryu. Chen Ryu opened her mouth, opened her red lips slightly, and inhaled the wisp of black smoke. Then, Chen Ryu stretched out her waist lazily, like a little girl who had just finished enjoying dessert in the afternoon, with that kind of natural aura. "Hey, do you need help?" Chen Ryu asked Subai. Boom! Subai directly blew himself up, and the old man was also blown to pieces. Immediately, Subai's body regrouped from the dust in the sky. Chen Ryu only ate good food and absorbed only the essence part, but the remaining pieces of flesh and blood also contained most of the essence of a high-level listener. Subai was naturally rude and began to absorb Chen Ryu's leftovers to regain his body. It's just that the original color in Subai's eyes began to slowly fade away, and began to appear gray and white, while the evil aura and death aura that enveloped Subai's body began to become more and more intense, and even experienced some changes. forming a special form of rotation. After being injured and recovered again and again, overdraft within overdraft, Sudbai's whole body has gradually begun to become numb, leaving only the most primitive killing. Chen Ryu came to Sudbai's side and reached out to gently sweep Sudbai's chin. "My little man, sister, have I excited you? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 993. The Parc des Princes Stadium in Paris is the home stadium of the French Ligue 1 team Paris Saint-Germain. Because it is the national team match day recently and leagues in various countries have been temporarily suspended, the stadium seems very quiet now. A young man wearing a black robe sat in a position in the middle area, holding a hamburger in his left hand and a bottle of Coke in his right hand. He did not look like a tourist visiting the stadium at this time, and he looked up from time to time. Take a look at the situation in the air. Not long after, a ray of white light fell from above and landed accurately next to the young man in black robe. Janek's clothes were torn and his aura was very disordered. He had the true impression of a bereaved dog. "Damies, where is the person I asked you to call?" Janek asked. When he saw that there was only the young man in black robe here, his heart seemed to sink to the bottom. The young man known as Damies smiled and shook his head, dropped the burger and Coke in his hands, clapped his hands. "Right here." "What? I mean, it's right here." Damies seemed to disdain to continue talking nonsense. "They are almost here." Janek looked behind him worriedly and said nervously, "Damies, they have. The people in Belgium and the Netherlands have been killed by them. It was all your fault." Damies pointed his hand at Janek's face unceremoniously and said, "It was you who gave them enough cause and effect. They have reasons to hunt you down, and even all Western listeners who stand in their way will become their legitimate targets, because they occupy the cause and effect." "Damies, I think now is not the time to talk about this," Janek shouted, staring at Damies. "Of course I know, but you should also know that you were scared to this point, and adding me to the mix doesn't seem to make any difference." "Damies, what on earth are you going to say?" "It's nothing. Look, those two auras that have been chasing you have slowed down their movements on purpose." Damies smiled and said, "They are waiting to give you time to escape, waiting for you. Go and continue to look for help." "Janek, you are really stupid. You actually listened to laymen and went to the east to find that thing. Don't you know that we in the west don't even have a big boss now? But now there are two big bosses in the east. This woman is not a big shot, and that Sudbai is even less so." Janek explained, "I didn't provoke." Since that woman is not a big shot, what happened to you guys?" Damies straightened his collar and said in a deep voice, "And Angel said she is a female demon who is eager to kill and prove her truth. They came to the West riding on one person's karma, and it was you who gave them this opportunity." Janek really wanted to fall out at this moment, but he couldn't go back to England now. After all the high-level listeners in England went to the East with him, and he was the only one in the end. People are back, and now they are counting on high-level listeners from other countries and regions to help them avoid disaster. And Angel? That gypsy witch, Janek seemed to see a life-saving vegetable. "Tell me, what is she going to do? What is she going to do? How to do it?" Damies smiled, with a ruthless look on his face, and said in a deep voice, "This is the territory of the West after all. The people in the East want to prove it, and they want to rely on the lives of the Western audience to build it. Her path to enlightenment is absolutely unacceptable. What I can tell you is that all the high-level listeners in Paris are gathering here. No matter what, they must stay here, or I will seal you directly now and let them kill you directly. In this way, there will be no cause and effect to continue to hunt other listeners for revenge by hunting you down. Lyman and Chicos are not dead. It's okay for them to drive me and expelled Lyman's souls to continue to make excuses. Therefore, sealing me will not solve the problem, Janek explained desperately. Of course, sealing you won't solve the problem. A bloated woman walked out from the cement wall in front, where there was originally a poster of the football star Neymar. The woman held a huge crystal bead in her hand and said, "Just now, 3 more people went to check the situation. Senior listeners were directly killed by them as obstructionists. Since Janek crossed the English Channel, 8 senior listeners have been hunted and killed by them. This is purely treating us Western listeners as human beings." And Angel Janek said hello to this woman very respectfully at this time. Normally, he would not bother to do this. He admitted that this woman was scary and seemed to have the ability to predict the future. One of the few people who came closest to enlightenment in the Western audience circle after the last batch of trains left. Now, only she and the identity and background she represents can save herself. In fact, in other words, although there are 2 big bosses in Dongfang now, one of them is the boss from the beginning and stayed because he didn't get on the train, and the other one is inspired by the advice of his predecessors. Those in the West who have successfully achieved enlightenment are actually not far behind. Why doesn't that woman come down? Angel moved his bloated figure and looked up at the sky. Then a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. She's come down. The crystal ball floated up and hovered in front of Angel. Angel stroked his crystal ball with a look of regret, and then mouthed the obscure spell at the beginning of the year. Then, the crystal ball began to crack, and soon fell apart completely. Turned into a sky filled with starlight and scattered all around. At this moment, the figures of Subai and Chen Ryu fell from the sky. The empty stadium was quite suitable for use as an arena. However, when Subai saw Janek in the stands not far away and the man and woman beside him, his grey and white pupils were at this moment flow out strange colors. "I'm really curious, are you awake now?" Chen Ryu was still floating behind Subai, staring into Subai's eyes carefully. "It stands to reason that your period of illness should have ended." Subai was silent. Chen Ryu said no more. She flashed forward and appeared in front of the stands, directly closing the distance between herself and the opposite stands. "I've killed 2 groups of people, and finally I found one who can let me take another look." Chen Ryu put her hands behind her back, and when she spoke, a sense of arrogance naturally filled the air. Janek looked at Chen Ryu with infinite fear. He had seen with his own eyes how Chen Ryu easily eliminated those high-level audience members. This woman was so terrifying, and what was even more terrifying was that there is no proof. Damies wanted to take a step forward and say something, but when Chen Ryu glanced at him, he suddenly felt that his body had become much heavier, so heavy that he could not breathe. At the moment, he could only hold on and hold on. He stepped back, his body immediately wet with sweat, but at this time, no one would notice or laugh at his embarrassment. Among the people present, it seemed that only the fat gypsy witch, known as Ant Angel in the circle, could continue to maintain her calmness. "Friends from the East, is your behavior a little too much? You know, broadcasters are not fools. If you do this, don't tell me that you don't know that the radio is going to implement an audience destruction plan." Chen Ryu directly interrupted Ant Angel. "So, if we don't go crazy, we will be old." Ant Angel's eyes narrowed, and she nodded with a smile. "You are right, this is the best era, and it is also the era with the loosest broadcast management, and it is even an era on the eve of amnesty. If you attain enlightenment, you can live. If you don't attain enlightenment, you won't live long." Ant Angel clapped her hands. In an instant, a figure walked out from 7 even positions on the court below. The figure included a boyfriend, a woman, an old friend, and a young friend, but everyone exuded an amazing aura. Each of these, they are all high-level experts. In fact, the number of high-level listeners in each region is not too many. In England, there are 7 if you include Hills. But now, With Angel and Damies in the stands, there are not many in France. Most of the high-level audience members gathered here. And Angel has actually been stuck in the realm of enlightenment for a long time. In fact, she is actually a contemporaneous member of the last batch of big guys who left by train. Therefore, her qualifications are very important in the Western audience circle, especially the French audience circle. She is old enough, and she is good at making connections, and is known for being a mentor to her juniors, which also makes her highly popular. Chen Ryu looked at the high-level expert who came out from below. There was no look of surprise on her face. Instead, she looked at her fingers and blew on her nails. I've been here for so long, and I finally saw someone interesting. Oh, and Angel's left eye released a ray of starlight, and the entire Parc des Princes stadium was also wrapped in a starlight at this time. Below, each of the 7 French high-level experts holds a line, which is divided into one corner of the real formation, and together they maintain the operation of the entire formation. I have been stuck in this realm for a long time, so I am very grateful to you for giving me this opportunity. And Angel floated and came to a position less than 10 meters away from Chen Ryu. At this time, her body it almost became translucent, and there seemed to be countless stars circulating in its body. Today, we will see whether it is you who has attained enlightenment or I have attained enlightenment. The easiest way to get to the top is to step on others and move up. The failed party will become a stepping stone for the successful party. A smile appeared on Chen Ryu's lips. For her, the really interesting things seemed to have just begun. As for Subai, who was standing behind her, the gray and white in his eyes seemed to be a little darker than before. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 994. The upcoming showdown at the Parc des Princes in Paris, apart from the 2 Oriental giants, can almost be regarded as the highest level collision in the entire world in this era. Enlightenment is a hurdle, and those who can reach this point are all outstanding people. However, some people can achieve enlightenment smoothly, while others are stuck there for a long time without understanding. Even Chen Ryu still she entered a path that made even her laugh or cry. Her strength continued to improve, but her realm remained motionless for a long time. At present, both Angel and Chen Ryu regard each other as a stepping stone on their own path to enlightenment. Especially under the current background, time has become countless times more precious than usual. In the past, in fact, this realm is actually the most beautiful. Once upon a time, Boss Liang was crying and wiping his tears and snot, but he just didn't want to attain enlightenment. He tried so hard to stay at the top of the high-level audience, because if you take one more step forward, you will attain enlightenment and you will receive it. The train ticket goes to another world while enduring loneliness and being cannon fodder. Nowadays, the most popular theme is to follow the right path or die. The first one to launch the offensive was not Angel, who had the right place at the right time, but Chen Ryu. This woman seemed to have a heart that kept moving upwards. Perhaps the only time she retreated was when she was killed by Subai at the place of enlightenment. Of course, if you use coercion in that way, if you retreat in the face of a psychopath, no one will laugh at you for being timid. This principle applies both in real society and in the audience circle. As soon as Chen Ryu moved, layers of starlight appeared around her body, as if a huge net pouring down from the sky. It could have covered the sky and the sun, but now it only targets you. Chen Ryu's body and the stars in front of her collided fiercely, like a burning fire cooking oil, or like the collision between soldering irons, constantly bursting out dazzling fireworks. And Angel opened her hands and closed her eyes tightly. At this moment, she is the sky, she is the earth, she is a sea of stars, she is the game, and Chen Ryu is the game breaker. The former needs to be calm, and the latter can keep struggling and resisting. Subai floated aside, the starlight did not target him, and no one in the other Western audiences around him paid attention to him. Indeed, here, he, Subai, is not the real protagonist, but the two women who are fighting now are the person who determines the true direction of the scales here. Subai was not dissatisfied at all about this. He even had no emotions at all at this time. The gray and white colors in his eyes kept spinning. He seemed to be asleep, but the coldness emanating from his body from time to time, but his fierce aura was telling anyone around him who looked at him that he was by no means an easy character to get along with. "Can you beat that guy?" Damis said, looking at Subai in the distance. Janek shook his head. Layman would probably have died directly in his hands. "Oh, you're British ice magician," Damis nodded slightly. "Then it seems that if you and I face him alone, we are probably no match. It is really helpless and frustrating. The middle-level music industry can bring so much pressure to us. If this era were not coming to an end, I am really worried that after this generation, the Eastern audience circle will completely surpass our Western audience." "No," Janek said. "Haha, sometimes, one or two geniuses are enough. For example, the woman named Lychee." Back then when he mentioned the name, Damis showed a gloomy look on his face, but at the beginning, that woman was Diamond. There is a loophole that no big guy in the West dares to fight her head on, but this time, no one will really hold back in the environment of not attaining enlightenment or death. Therefore, this woman may not be as lucky as that Lychee back then." "Can I leave?" Janek suddenly asked. "I'm seriously injured, and it's useless to stay." When Damis heard this, he was stunned for a moment, then smiled bitterly and said, "Are you British listeners going to completely lose face this time?" Janek does not have the slightest bit of shame. Western audiences are also divided into small groups that are close to each other and opposed to each other based on their national or cultural regional identity and other special reasons. But for Janek at the moment, the face of the British audience really doesn't matter. After all, during this trip to the East, 4 high-level British experts fell down, and I still have a weird character named Hills. It can be said that I don't even have any dignity. Who cares about this person? Face. Damis didn't say anything else. He even felt a little pity for Janek, because he could see that Janek's courage was completely frightened this time. If he can't overcome this time, things will be in his heart. The shadow of fear left behind probably means there is no hope of enlightenment. Janek left. He planned to go to Italy first, and then take a look at the situation here. The real showdown here will not have any impact whether Janek leaves or not, and it is also at this time that it slowly enters a fever pitch. Chen Ryu has strong close combat ability, because her understanding and application of the laws of space are almost perfect, so Ant Angel deliberately did not give Chen Ryu a chance to close combat. This is a battle for momentum, and it is also a battle of courage. Ant Angel's advantage is too great, so there is no need to really go toe-to-toe with Chen Ryu. The method she is using now is actually the same as the one the armored man used against Subai before. The methods used are similar, but they are nothing more than using force to suppress others. Chen Ryu has been resisting until now. Although she is not at a disadvantage, everyone knows that if Chen Ryu cannot break through this restraint and pressure in a short time, then when the manpower is finally exhausted, she will definitely not be able to sustain it for too long. The 7 powerful French high-level audience members around the stadium stood in awe. Although Ant Angel bore most of the power of Chen Ryu's resistance, they themselves could also sense how terrifying the energy vortex caused by Chen Ryu's resistance was. Such a woman must not be allowed to leave, let alone have a chance to get out of trouble, otherwise she and others will be like a sheep entering a tiger's mouth. Damis sensed the surroundings and found that there were actually nearly 20 junior and intermediate senior listeners waiting nearby. Perhaps, only Ant Angel could have such a strong appeal. Therefore, for this event, in the duel, Damis has always maintained a relatively optimistic attitude. The Western Circle has been able to confront the Eastern Circle for so many generations, so it naturally has its own heritage. Unless the 2 Eastern bosses intervene unruly at this time, this Eastern woman will definitely die. And Angel always had a smile on her lips, because she could feel that although Chen Ru's resistance was very strong every time, and even made her feel a little shocking, she could feel that Chen Ru's momentum had begun to slowly decline. Human beings are small. The gods are also small. Only the sky is full of stars. Is the true supreme. Because it contains the true principle. Because it represents supreme majesty. A sense of pride arose in Aunt Angel's heart. Perhaps this was her persistence and her long-term waiting. However, it was completely ignited in this powerful conversation. For a moment, Aunt Angel's aura after rising again, the sea of stars in his body began to accelerate at this time. My state that had been stagnant for a long time actually loosened at this moment. There was a burst of ecstasy in Aunt Angel's heart. Yes, that's it. She and the Oriental woman in front of her are just sharpening each other's path. In this duel, whoever wins will be able to realize the truth. Whoever loses will stop at this life. This. Once your Tao is defeated, how can you believe in it and regain enlightenment? So. This time. You must win. Unfortunately, it is impossible for Subai now to know Aunt Angel's inner thoughts, otherwise she would definitely think of Boss Liang who became enlightened in the first place. At the beginning, Boss Liang demonstrated the doctrine in front of Subai, and the first tombstone was directly hit and destroyed by Lizzie's tombstone. Then Boss Liang actually quickly produced another tombstone to prove the doctrine successfully. Compared with the current peak life and death showdown between Chen Ru and Aunt Angel, Boss Liang's behavior that time really felt so casual. It seems that his way is like the cabbage on the roadside. If you don't like it, you just throw it away and then pull it out. Blessed by 7 high-level French experts, Aunt Angel, who was also half-stepped into enlightenment, occupied the perfect time, place, and people. After Chen Ru's initial momentum, she began to slowly decline, but she was not too panicked. But turned his head and looked at Subai, who was standing behind him, lightly opened his red lips and said, "Help me." Subai slowly raised his head, and the gray and white colors in his eyes had completely occupied all of Subai's eyes. Condition. This was Subai's response. "If I lose, you won't survive," Chen Ru replied. Yes, once Chen Ru was defeated, Subai would definitely not be able to survive. In fact, the reason why Subai was able to travel from England to Paris was because he had Chen Ru, a big killer, by his side. Otherwise, he might have been intercepted by the previous waves. It is difficult to rush over, let alone kill all those people. Condition. But Subai still insisted. Otherwise, the worst case scenario is that we'll die together. Chen Ru hesitated. Subai at this time gave her a familiar feeling, like the madman who waved his fist and was about to smash all the tombstones in the place of enlightenment. "Help me this time. After I become enlightened, I will do 3 things for you. 3 unconditional things. Unconditionally, even if you let me die," Chen Ru replied. Subai showed a smile, then raised his head, spread his arms. Chen Ru fell down, gently caressed Subai's cheek with soft catkins, then raised her head and shouted sweetly, "I'll lend you a river to cross the underworld together." For a time. There seems to be an endless spring flowing out of Chen Ru's catkins. The water from the underworld is surging, rushing towards the sea of stars in front of you with its indomitable reincarnation and will to die.